thanks a lot, both of you, for the invitation and being here. It's been a great workshop, and I'm going to tell you about birdsong in natural and naturalistic conditions, so in the field and in the lab. So in general, I'm interested in understanding behavioral plasticity and the underlying plasticity in brains. And today I'm going to tell you plasticity in social contexts. And I think that in general, when we think of natural behavior, very often we forget about the social context. Context is very important. And I'm going to tell you about it in the context of birdsong. So birdsong is a learned motor skill. It's culturally transmitted by the parents. So parents are tutors, and chicks are going to learn the song from the tutor, typically very often the dad, since only males sing in many species, and the one I'm going to tell you about today. Song is used for sexual attraction, for territoriality, and also to signal social hierarchy. So all these functions are immediately social and happen in mixed groups of males and females. However, how ongoing motor production, that is song, is affected by the social context remains quite unexplored. And the model I'm going to tell you about is a canary, and there's something really interesting about the canary is that we really know the behavioral and ecological implications of singing on the female choice. So females are going to choose males that sing according to the song and the song quality of these males. So it's a trait that's selected by sexual selection, and therefore females need to have several males to be able to choose. However, typically when we do studies of birds in neuroscience, take place in boxes that sound isolated. We'll have one or maybe two birds, so here one male and a female canary. However, we lack this component of having several males that are competing for the female. So the question I'm going to try to answer is, does the natural social context influence the production of learned songs? And the first thing I'm going to show you is what I found in the wild, looking for these little canaries. So the wild form from which they were domesticated about 200 years ago. You find them typically you find them only in these beautiful volcanic islands of Macaronesia. That counts basically so you have the Canary Islands, the Azores, and Madeira. And you typically find them in groups of from few canaries to hundreds of canaries. So for example, in this forest in Fayal Island, you typically have about 10 males visiting frequently and singing together here. In this grassland, it was quite spectacular. There was about hundreds of them singing. Here in Pico Island, they really love these places so you can really see that typically they really love places that are close to grassland or no trees, where sound propagates really efficiently, and they nest on these trees. And in these typical landscapes of Pico Island, you will find lots of them. And in all of these places, you will find many canaries that are singing very often together, and that's something you can see in this example. So I was recording here in Aliedo, using two directional microphones on two sides of this field, so one pointing to these trees, and the other one to the bushes here. So I just depicted one microphone here in blue, and with a little bird in blue, and a microphone in red with a little bird in red, because this will sample preferentially the songs of one bird or the other. And I labeled here, so in the spectrograms you can see the frequency of sound in the y-axis, and in the x-axis you can see the time. I can observe I labeled the syllables in red for the songs that were preferentially detected in microphone 1, and in blue for those of canary detected in microphone 2. You can see there's a fair amount of overlap, and this was a quite frequent situation. So contrary to many other birds that avoid overlapping and take turns, canaries in the wild were definitely overlapping their songs. But that was pretty complex, and if you think there was about 5 other songbird species in the same niche also singing, and lots of calls from many other birds, when I tried to understand how canaries within the species were interacting through singing, I decided to go a bit less natural and more naturalistic. So with this compromise that we always have, and I went back to the master plan for ornithology, where I backpacked these canaries with backpack microphones that allow me to detect the songs of individual canaries simultaneously. So I'm going to show you a video of this setting that I've been using in the lab, which has 3 males, so here shown in black, and 2 females. So that's a ratio of 3 to 2. There's competition for females. And that's a ratio you find in the wild. So there's a real competition. And males will try to seduce females by singing. One of the females is already here in the nest. The other one will nest, which is here, will nest soon. And in the video I'm going to show you, they are both in the nest. This nest is a bit moved actually. And I will let you observe the behaviors. I think behavior is a lot about watching and observing and trying to understand what's going on. And then we will go through all the quantifications I did with these backpack microphones. So here's a video where I will just identify shortly who is who. So you have the 2 females that are in the 2 nests, so that's easy, they want to move. You have 1 male canary here. I don't tell you what he will do. And then you have 2 other canaries that will be here singing. So pay attention, you can detect relatively well who is singing by the movement of feathers. And you will see basically that these 2 males are going to sing together, establishing singing duels that are followed by fights. And this canary would rather be observing what's going on. This guy singing, this one takes over. So then as in periods, there's very often fights. They try to approach the female, chase each other, and they start again. So I quantified this, and to be sure of who is singing at each time, I've been using these backpack microphones. Just before, I will tell you that there's about 4 times more chances that the birds fight after overlapping their songs in these duels than when they do solo singing. So it's a quite honest signal, what we call honest signal in behavior, which basically predicts that there's going to be an escalade and fighting, as has been shown in many other birds. And the tool I'm using, the technology, are these backpack microphones that I can put in these birds. They can freely fly, and I can detect the songs. This is what I would detect if I had only a central microphone in the room. And if I put these backpacks, you can see that this very complex signal can be separated in 2 clear songs, one of 3 syllables here, and another one from another bird. So using this technology, I've been first looking analyzing whether they tend to sing at the same time. So here you can see the alignment of all the songs of one day of this canary depicted in blue at the onset. So it started at time 0, and I've been aligning accordingly at the times at which the other bird was singing relative to this bird. And you can see the songs of the white bird, so here shown by these deflections, are clustering around the time at which the blue canary is singing. If you do a very similar histogram, you can see that most songs cluster around time 0, so at the onset of the blue canary. And that was reproduced in the 5 groups that I've been studying. What's quite interesting is that if we examine in detail these graphs day by day, we can see that there's interesting dynamical changes. For example, here in day 4, you have we're aligning bird 2 to bird 1. Bird 2 is slightly singing after bird 1. You can see there's this activity after the onset of bird 1. But so it's being mostly a follower, it's following the other song that started singing. The bird 2 is here also starting to be a leader. It's mostly a leader on day 7. And then you have this constant reconfiguration where none of the birds gives up. They are both leaders and followers. Something that's interesting is that in these groups, there's 2 clear strategies. So you have these birds I told you about that tend to duel, but you also have a 3rd bird that's mostly singing solo songs. So here you have in white the solo songs or single songs, and then you have the dueling songs that are overlapping, so with the leading ones in black and the following ones in gray. You can see that bird 1 and bird 2 are establishing most of the duels in this group, and bird 3 is mostly deciding to make solo songs. And that was happening in all the groups. So that was quite interesting also in terms of behavioral strategies, and not all the birds do the same. If we now try to understand within this group, where we had solo songs, leading songs, and following songs, where the songs differ according to the context in which they occur. So basically, do we have some plasticity of songs, and are they different when birds are singing alone, leading a song contest, or following? It's quite interesting because we can see that the song length is increasing when the bird is leading, L, relative to the solo songs, S, and in some cases it's also increasing when the bird is following. So the strategy that's always adopted by the two birds is increasing the song length when they lead, and sometimes they do so when they follow, as can be shown here in this in the pool data. So there's a significant increase in song length when they lead, and that increase is not significant when they follow. What's interesting is not only the song length, but also the variability of song length that's increasing. So basically, it's not only they sing longer, but also they sing more variable songs when they are leading contests. And this, of course, brings many questions of why these two birds that have one strategy and the other one that has a different strategy. And so I asked the question of whether there's a difference between the songs from the two birds that establish most of the duels and the soloist. And the two duelists actually have songs that are more similar in length, in pitch, and in repetition rate. So basically how frequently they're going to repeat syllables. And that's, so from all the other parameters I examined, these were the only three that were significantly different. So here I depicted, I subtracted the absolute values of the repetition rate between one duelist and the other duelist, or between each duelist with the soloist, and the repetition rate difference between both of them was smaller between the duelists than the duelist and the soloist. So basically, the repetition rate was more similar between duelists than with the soloist, and same happened with the pitch of the song and the song length. So I just would like to point here that these analyses were done with songs that were the solo songs, so they were not influenced during competition. So it looks like the repertoire or the songs that these birds are singing are more similar in the group, in the two that tend to make these duels. So to conclude, I will tell you that canaries overlap their songs in duels. These duels are accompanied by aggression. There's behavioral plasticity during these social interactions, so canaries sing different, longer songs and more variable songs when they sing together. Song length carries the signature of singing leadership, so the relative timing at which one bird starts before the other. And there's two strategies. There's the first strategy of birds that sing frequently and make frequent dueling behavior. And there's also another bird that sings less and that rarely overlaps. And what's quite interesting is that these two birds, for this first strategy, occurs for birds that have more similar songs. So we'll discuss three points here. So there's been, interestingly, these overlaps have not been described, probably because of the lack of technology, but to do so. But what we knew is that there was a work where people had been doing playbacks of two songs, so song A, B, A, B, A, B, where B was always overlapping. And where when a female, after all these presentations, female canary, was presented with the overlapping song, she used to make more copulation solicitation displays. So as the name indicates, it's a behavioral posture that tells us about how much this female is liking this song and asking for copulation. And overlapping songs were more successful in eliciting these copulation solicitation displays than the overlapped songs. And that probably explains why, if a canary is starting to sing for the other one, if there's a pressure to last longer than the other one, you need to sing longer. That's probably, let's say, the context and the pressure, the evolutionary pressure, that may be behind this behavioral plasticity. And the second aspect I would like to discuss, and I guess this is probably a general take-home message from the workshop, is that probably I think that future research should aim at studying behavior in natural, naturalistic social conditions and integrate knowledge from behavioral ecology. And even myself, I try to do both in the field and in the lab, but definitely I would like to go more to the field and repeat all these backpack recordings in the field. And one of the messages, I think, is that even for behaviors that are so obviously social, we tend to forget including the social component. And I guess it applies to many social animals, when they are foraging, when they are performing many experiments. And I think this would be my big take-home message. And just a short note on the neurobiological implications that this may have. So I'm a neurobiologist, and when I arrived to Birdsong, I really wanted to understand well and in detail behavior before I was going into the understanding of neurobiology. And here the implications are really interesting, and I'm starting to test them now, which is there's this powerful idea in the songbird field that, well, based on many experiments, that the premotor networks, when the sound is being produced, are not activated anymore by auditory inputs, which they are when the bird is not singing. So here, in a way, during the premotor activation during singing, there is a feedback from the auditory input from another bird that's singing at the same time, that's modifying the ongoing premotor program. So that's basically what I'm going to try to understand, how this premotor program is modified and where this social context is encoded in the brain. So if you want to read more about it, the article is in bioRxiv. And I would like to acknowledge, so first of all, Manfred Gall, whose lab I've been performing all these experiments. Shu and Mada helped me a lot to perform quantifications that I showed you today. And the LMU, which is also the other funding body that has supported me for the last 2 years and a half. And finally, last but not least, thanks for your attention. I'm open to questions.
That was really cool, thank you. I have two questions. One, do you think in your actual experimental setup, the dueling strategy actually works for these birds? Like, do the females actually elicit more copulation postures?
Mm-hmm.
And second, do you think, so, there's, in the birdsong literature has been shown that a bird's own song played back to it, elicits all sorts of activations in say, premotor circuits like HPC. Do you think that has something to do with the fact that it's those two similar singers that do the duets rather than the third soloist? Like, do you think that has an impact on the actual circuitry?
Yeah. So, well, for the second question, I think that's you pointing something really interesting. If I understood what you mean, maybe I'm interpreting going to some hypotheses. Is that these premotor networks could be activated differently if you have a bird that sings a very similar song. Yeah. And actually, there's some work in canaries that shows that HGC, so-called historically, because we call that the high vocal center, that controls timing during the song, is activated differently. Is activated also when there's songs from other canaries that are singing, and not all other songs elicit the same responses. So it could well be somehow that some songs that are too different are gated out. That's a hypothesis. Indeed, that could be done. I'm sorry, I forgot the other question.
The question is
about the behavior, about whether females really care about this thing. So I have lots of video recordings, and I'm also taking samples to know who is the father of the chicks, to know if indeed the two guys that are singing are more efficient in having chicks with the females than the other ones. I don't have the response right now. What we can definitely see from the video we saw is that the female is not very responsive, right? So the problem and that leads us to what the cool thing of birds is that there's a lot of behavior that's been done, even if there's no neuroscience associated. And so females don't like, so typically female canaries avoid spending too much time, or more time with the males that's most aggressive. But they also spend more time or make more copulation solicitations when they hear the overlapping sound. So we have here some conflicting stuff, right? What's going to dominate? Is it the fact that the song is sexy, or are these guys too aggressive and I don't want to have anything to do with them? And I guess only the paternity tests I'm going to do, I'm going to give the really interesting answer in terms of evolutionary terms.
Some more questions?
Yes.
Yeah, so two questions. One, about does the fighting and the singing duels affect one another? I mean, which one is preceding which? Not temporally in terms of the effect. So is it that if they fight and one kind of wins on this local fight, that this will affect the next cycle of song duel? And the second question is, what does the one that stays on the soldier, or the one that stays on its own, is doing? Why doesn't it try to sing with the other ones? Because if this is the chance to get some response from the females, that's a very weird strategy, just to sing to himself.
Well, he's not singing to himself, right? He's not singing in an aggressive context. So, actually what seems quite interesting, but this is from observation that I'm waiting for the paternity, is that this bird that sings alone seems to have his female, and he seems to be very efficient. But the two other ones may be having similar songs that are liked by the same female, and at the end of the day, they are spending a lot of energy fighting a lot, which is also dangerous. And these guys are very aggressive and can severely injure each other. And at the end, they may have both chicks with the same female. So I don't think we should think that that strategy of singing alone and not fighting is a loser strategy.
No, fine.
Just to go to elaborate on that. Then
I'm okay
so
with stable relationships, that's fine.
yeah, well, indeed. Yeah, we cannot assume monogamy in this group of 3+2. So the other group is how was the relationship between these fights, if I understood well, between the fighting and the singing. Also in terms of, if one wins a fight, what happens in the next time that they're gonna sing? Is it gonna be the leader or the follower? And is that gonna have an impact on the female they're taking more care? That's an excellent question. I did not analyze these video recordings, but I will. That's a very good suggestion.
I have a question, but I think you sort of already answered it. In the video, it seemed like one of the female, like the two guys were not fighting for the other female, right? They were mainly focused on the one on the left. So presumably, the solo guy is favored by the other female. Is that correct? Presumably, okay. And how long does it take for this to establish? And then, is it the case then that if you put the males with other males, let's say you take the soloist and put him with other males and two other females, will he now become a fighter, or will he still be, a soloist?
Yeah. So I'm starting these experiments right now. So I don't have the answer yet. For the other question, which was about the soloist. So what's the first one?
No, it was sort of related. I think you answered the question.
Yeah. So I'm not sure. So this comes from observations I've been doing. That so my impression, but now I really have to go to the first. I didn't take video cameras from the very beginning. So in the next experiments, I will really take care of seeing whether indeed, so at what time scale these relationships established, and whether the soloist gets the attention of a female from the very beginning. So I think that's quite likely from observations, but I don't have the video recordings to know the time scale and whether that's really the case. But again, I'm doing experiments now that I hope will answer.
And if you had one single female in there, would the three of them fight over her?
That's an excellent question. So right now I have pairs, and I will put them in different combinations, one with two, one with three, and I will try to answer these questions. What's the minimum amount? What's the competition context in which this happens? Do they even need females to start doing these tools? So there's a lot of stuff that is interesting. Yeah.
We take one last question.
Yes.
Yeah, very related to that. So I heard, or like between the lines, that you assume that there are two fighting ones and one solo one because the songs are very similar. If you always see two fighting and one solo one, that would be very weird that there's always two that have similar songs and one that has a different one. Or do you think that's developing?
So it's an excellent question. So I think anyways, in a group of three, there will be two that will be more similar, right? But now the question is really interesting if you think of whether they were more similar before, and that predispose them somehow because they have the same similar songs, and maybe that attracts the same female, and somehow they will end up, because of the similarity, fighting. But it could very well be also that they adapted the songs to the preference of the female, and that these songs were not that similar at the beginning, but they adapted, and there can even be like an intermediate situation where they had more similar songs, and they even try to make them more similar to maybe please a female and fight for that female. So I think that these are fascinating questions that, I'm also trying to work on.
Thank you, Pepe. So our next speaker, Jimena.